The first time Rachel heard her name echo through that marble hall, she thought she was imagining it. Rachel Moore, the man at the podium said again, his voice rolling under the high ceiling of Dayton City Hall. The person who changed everything, without even knowing it. She stood just outside the double doors, palms sweating against a paper program, her thrift store blazer suddenly too tight. She could see him through the crack between the doors. The man in the navy suit. Confident. Calm. A tiny girl in a yellow dress sat in the front row, swinging her feet, eyes shining. Rachel knew that face. Knew the tired lines around his mouth when he tried to smile. Knew the way his shoulders had once sagged over a cracked plastic steering wheel in a gas station parking lot at 1:00 a.m. in January. He'd had oil on his hands back then, not a microphone. And he had definitely not been standing under a banner that read, "Summit on Human Dignity at Work." "Before we unveil our new partnership," he said, glancing toward the doors, "there's someone we need to thank." The crowd went quiet. The usher at her elbow whispered, "That's you. He wants you on stage." Rachel's legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. Because the last time she had seen that man, he and his little girl were shivering in the fluorescent half-dark of a closed convenience store, and Rachel had been a nobody behind a cash register, praying her shift supervisor wouldn't notice what she was about to do. "Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world." 3 months earlier, Rachel Moore's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. in her one-bedroom apartment on the west side of Dayton, Ohio. She didn't hit snooze. She never did. There was a pill organizer to refill a blood pressure cuff to wrap around her mother's thin arm, and a worn recliner to help ease up inch by inch until Evelyn Moore could shuffle to the kitchen table. "Morning, baby." Her mother rasped the same way she always did, like the words cost her something. "Morning, Mama," Rachel answered, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. By 6:00 a.m., she would be in her faded blue polo badge clipped to her collar, standing under the harsh lights of the discount pharmacy, tucked inside a bargain grocery store. Next in line, she'd say 100 times a day, insurance cards, co-pays, people sighing when the wait was longer than 5 minutes. Nobody saw the dark circles under her eyes. Nobody knew she'd once had an acceptance letter to the University of Missouri's journalism program pinned above her childhood desk. Full ride, big dreams. She'd taken it down the day her mother's heart gave out on a loading dock and never fully recovered. Since then, her life was measured in refill dates and overtime hours, in how long she could stand on aching feet before the room tilted, in how many times she could leave her phone on vibrate and still hear it buzz from her pocket, terrified it was the hospital again. She believed in doing right by people, in calling older customers sir and ma'am even when they snapped at her, in slipping an extra coupon across the counter when someone's hands shook as they counted out crumpled bills for heart medication. Her manager, Mr. Daniels, believed in numbers, in arrival times on a spreadsheet, in productivity metrics and coverage gaps. So when her phone lit up that Tuesday afternoon with unknown, Kettering Medical Center, and her mother's neighbor on the other end, saying she couldn't catch her breath, they took her in the ambulance. Rachel didn't ask permission. She yanked off her name tag, tossed it on the counter, and ran. By the time she came back the next morning, red-eyed and still wearing the same jeans, there was a write-up waiting. "You can't just walk out," Rachel Daniels said, not unkind, but not kind either. "We're all dealing with something. We need reliability, reliability." As if she hadn't built her whole life around being the one person her mother could rely on. 2 weeks later, the final warning sat folded in the bottom of her bag, and rent was coming due. She picked up every extra shift she could. Nights, weekends, holidays. Which is how, on the coldest night of January, she ended up working the graveyard shift alone at the 24-hour gas station owned by the same chain, the pharmacy already dark, the parking lot a sheet of black ice. At 12:47 a.m., the automatic doors slid open with a reluctant squeak. A man stepped in carrying a little girl in a too-thin jacket. Her cheeks were wind-burned, his knuckles were raw, and when Rachel glanced past them, she saw their car sitting under the buzzing streetlight. Hood up. No one else around. That was the night everything in her life quietly, stubbornly began to change. The thermostat in the gas station clicked over to a lower setting sometime around 1 a.m., and the blast of cold air that followed made Rachel's breath curl in front of her. The father and daughter stood near the coffee station, the girl rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand, the man trying to warm his fingers around a paper cup. For a moment, the place felt too quiet, too exposed, like the universe had whittled itself down to 3 tired souls under humming fluorescent lights. The man thanked her again for letting them wait inside while he figured out what to do about the car. She nodded, pretending she wasn't watching the little girl shiver, pretending she didn't see the way he tried to tuck his own frayed jacket around the child's shoulders. She knew that look, the look of someone trying to cover 2 problems with one thin blanket. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. By morning, her kindness would be the one thing she had left to stand on. The next afternoon, her manager called her into the back office. The door clicked shut behind them, and she already knew that tone. She'd heard it too many times in too many places. "Corporate saw your hours from last night," he said, tapping a report on the desk like a disappointed principal. "Graveyard wasn't your assignment. We only sent you over because of a call-out. You should have followed the book." She opened her mouth to explain, but he kept going. "We had inventory scheduled, and you logged far fewer item checks than protocol requires. That's a problem, Rachel. Inventory. While a frozen little girl slept on a plastic chair waiting for her father to talk to a tow truck company that would never answer after midnight. She just nodded and folded her hands, thumbs pressing hard into each other. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Look, you're a hard worker, nobody doubts that. But we need people who can stick to procedure. You're getting distracted. Whatever's going on at home, try to keep it from affecting your work." He didn't say her mother's name, because he didn't remember it. He didn't say heart failure, because it would have required empathy. He said it the way a man comments on weather. Distracted. She swallowed hard. When she stepped outside, snowflakes drifted down like feathers from a torn pillow. The cold stung her face, but for a moment she welcomed it. It felt honest. She walked home on foot to save money, her breath rising in clouds as she passed the corner bakery with its warm light and families talking over late-night pastries. She paused outside the window, watching a boy pull off his gloves and bury his hands in a cup of cocoa. Her chest tightened sharply. She hurried home. Her mother was asleep in the recliner, her breathing shallow, an Afghan tucked under her chin. Rachel knelt beside her and lifted the blanket closer around her shoulders. She kissed her mother's forehead, whispered that everything would be okay, and prayed silently that it would somehow be true. The next week, the pressure tightened. Customers at the pharmacy counter complained if she took too long checking insurance codes. An older man snapped at her because the price of his medication had gone up, telling her she didn't know what it was like to live on a fixed income. She wanted to say, "Sir, I do. I really do." But she didn't. She apologized instead. At home, her mother tried to hide the tremor in her hand as she reached for her evening pill bottle. "You're working too hard," she murmured. "I'm fine," Rachel lied, placing a steadying hand over her mother's wrist. "Everything's fine." 2 days later, The district supervisor arrived unannounced. A woman in her 50s with hair so perfectly curled, it looked like it didn't dare move. She strode down the aisle, heels clicking clipboard under her arm. When she stopped at Rachel's register, she didn't bother with a greeting. "You didn't upsell any of the promotional items this week," she said, scanning numbers. "Not one." Rachel blinked. "We've had a lot of customers asking about prescription shortages, so..." "Excuses," the supervisor said, closing the clipboard with a snap. "And this store is slipping in customer satisfaction." Employees set the tone. If you don't present confidence, the public won't feel it. Confidence. As if she carried it like a lipstick in her pocket. As if she hadn't been stitching herself together for years with nothing more than grit and whispered prayers. The supervisor stepped back, looking her up and down. "You look tired." "Are you tired?" Rachel straightened. "Just long days, ma'am." "Well, long days are part of the job. If you can't keep up, maybe another position would suit you better." Her stomach dropped. When the supervisor left, Rachel quietly returned to stacking greeting cards in the rotating rack, her hands trembling just slightly. She didn't cry. Not here, not at work. She had learned early emotions were best saved for dark apartments and silent hallways. That evening, her mother saw right through her. "You're quieter than usual," Evelyn whispered, sipping water from a plastic hospital cup she'd forgotten to return. "Something wrong." Rachel sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed the blanket. "Nothing I can't handle," she said, hoping her voice held steady. Her mother touched her cheek with a shaking hand. "You break before you bend, baby. You always have. Don't let this world push you so hard you forget who you are." Rachel turned away before the tears could fall. "I won't," she whispered. "I promise." Another week slipped by. The tow truck bill for the stranded man's car came out of her own account. She had insisted when he offered to repay. Something about the way his hands had shaken told her he didn't have it. He'd tried to hide it behind gratitude, but she saw. She always saw. Money was tight now, tighter than usual. Her mother's new medication wasn't covered under their old plan. Rent was creeping up, and the store was cutting hours. She worked every shift she could, pockets aching with fatigue, feet burning with every step. Then came the night everything cracked. A Friday evening rush, bitter wind slamming the glass doors each time someone entered. Rachel was bagging items for a mother wrangling 2 toddlers when Mr. Daniels called out from the back hallway. "Rachel, my office. Now!" She handed the bags to the customer, murmured an apology, and walked to the office with heavy steps. The supervisor was there. Her clipboard again. "I've reviewed your performance logs," she said, not looking up. "Your ring-up times are slow. Customer service scores inconsistent. And now I see you've been adjusting coupons manually without authorization." Rachel blinked. "Only if a customer was short. That's theft of profit." "No, ma'am, You cannot selectively discount merchandise because you feel sorry for someone," the supervisor cut in sharply. "This is a business, not a charity." Her vision tunneled just slightly. Her palms felt numb. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at her. "Given the pattern of issues, corporate recommends termination." The supervisor closed her folder. "It's final." For a moment, the world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator case, the chatter of customers, the squeak of carts. All of it faded. Rachel stood perfectly still, like if she didn't move, the moment wouldn't be real. "Please return your badge," the supervisor said. Rachel's fingers unclipped the plastic tag from her shirt. She set it on the desk with a small click. Her voice barely carried. "I understand." She stepped out of the office past the shelves of toothpaste and cereal and cheap holiday decorations. Past customers who didn't know her name. Past co-workers who looked away, unsure if approaching her made them next. She walked out into the frigid evening breath, sharp in the air. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the pavement. She stood there hugging her coat tighter, unsure where to go next. She had no job, no insurance, and a mother who needed medication within the week. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of the afternoon cashiers. "I'm so sorry. It should have been one of us. They just picked you because they knew you wouldn't fight back." Rachel shut her eyes, holding her breath until her ribs ached. She didn't blame them. Not one of them. The world didn't give people room to stand up without risking everything. But the words hit deeper than the firing. They picked you because they knew you wouldn't fight back. She sank into the driver's seat of her old sedan, the vinyl cold beneath her, and finally let her forehead rest against the steering wheel. Her mother's face floated into her mind, soft, kind, tired, but the image of the little girl in the gas station drifted in next. Her small fingers wrapped around a paper cup, trying to be brave in a world too big for her. Rachel wiped her eyes. The pressure in her life had been building for months, maybe years, but tonight felt like the breaking point. The kind that comes right before something else forces its way into the story. And deep down, beneath the exhaustion and fear, she sensed it. Something was coming. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay on the living room floor beside her mother's recliner, listening to every shallow rise and fall of breath, terrified it might stop. Bills were stacked on the coffee table like a tower waiting to collapse. The termination notice sat on top a single page that had the power to unravel everything she'd been holding together for years. Just after dawn, she finally drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. But her phone jolted her awake with a shrill vibration against the hardwood. Kettering Medical Center flashed across the screen. Her heartbeat stuttered. She answered instantly. "Is this Rachel Moore, a nurse?" asked voice clipped with controlled urgency. "We need you to come immediately. Your mother is in cardiac distress." The words hit her like a punch. She didn't grab a coat, didn't turn off the lamp. She just sprinted out the door, her keys shaking in her hand as she fumbled into the car. Traffic was stopped on Main Street because of a jackknifed delivery truck. She pounded the wheel, breath fogging the windshield. The hospital was only 2 miles away, but every second felt stolen from her. She couldn't wait. She couldn't sit still. She jammed the car into park and bolted out, running down the sidewalk through blowing sleet, her lungs burning her shoes, slipping on patches of ice. She didn't care. She had run farther than this before, for late buses, for double shifts, for promises she made to herself in the middle of the night, but never with fear this loud in her ears. The hospital doors slid open and the warmth hit her like a wave, but the smell, sterile, sharp, mechanical, was what made her knees wobble. She approached the nurse's desk, panting, clutching the counter. "My mother," she rasped. "Evelyn Moore." The nurse recognized her at once, face softening. "She's in a procedure room." Her heart rhythm changed suddenly. "The doctor's assessing now." Rachel's pulse thudded in her ears. "Is she? We're trying to stabilize her. Please wait in the hall." "Wait!" Every instinct in her screamed that she didn't have time for that word. And that was when she heard it, a sharp, frantic voice echoing from the next hallway. "It's my daughter, please. She can't breathe." A man's voice cracking. Desperate. Rachel turned. Down the corridor, a man stood holding a small child in his arms. A girl bundled in a pink coat, her face flushed. Her little hand clutched around his shirt as she wheezed loudly, a terrifying, choking sound between gasps. No nurse was in sight. The girl's chest heaved rapidly, and the father's eyes darted down the hall in full-blown panic. "Somebody help!" he shouted. Patients looked over. 2 visitors stepped aside. Someone muttered, "Where's the staff?" A fear Rachel knew too well rushed through her. The same fear she'd had watching her mother gasp for air on the living room floor months earlier. The same fear she'd seen in brave men holding their daughters at 1:00 a.m. under flickering gas station lights. She didn't think. Her body simply moved. She sprinted toward them. "What happened?" she asked, breath still uneven from her run. The father blinked at her, frantic. She has asthma bad. Her inhaler's empty. I didn't know it was out." She started wheezing in the car, and then she couldn't. The girl gasped again, her tiny shoulders trembling. Rachel forced calm into her voice. "It's okay. She's still getting air, but not enough. We need to get her oxygen right now." She looked down the hall. No staff, no wheelchair, nothing. And then she noticed what others hadn't: a supply cart parked halfway inside an open utility room stocked with hospital equipment. Her mind snapped into focus. She used to help her mother through episodes like this. She knew the signs. She knew what could happen if they waited too long. She knew how quickly a child's airway could close. "You," she said to the father, "come with me." She didn't wait for agreement. She picked up the girl's legs and helped settle her more securely in her father's arms. They hurried to the cart. Rachel grabbed a pediatric oxygen mask still sealed in plastic. "Hold her upright," she said gently. "Keep her calm." Her hands worked automatically, assembling the tubing, checking the oxygen valve, the way she'd watched nurses do 100 times. The father shook. "I didn't know where to go. No one was around. And you're here now," Rachel said, her tone soft but sure. "She's going to be okay." The girl's eyes fluttered wide with fear as Rachel slipped the mask over her nose and mouth. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. "Try to breathe slow for me. In, out, good girl." The oxygen flowed. The little girl's breaths were still ragged but less shallow. A doctor rushed down the hall just then, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on?" he barked. "A child in respiratory distress," Rachel said, stepping back. "Asthma attack. Inhaler empty. Oxygen started 30 seconds ago." The doctor blinked, taken aback. "You set this up?" "Yes, sir. Do you work here?" "No." The father spoke quickly, voice trembling. "She saved my daughter. I didn't know what to do." The doctor's posture changed instantly. He knelt beside the child, adjusting the valve. "You may have just prevented a collapse," he said to Rachel, without looking away from the girl. She swallowed, throat tight. When the staff arrived with a gurney, the father, crying, now looked at Rachel, as if she had reached into a burning building to pull them out. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. I thought she was going to stop breathing." Rachel shook her head, emotion thickening her voice. "You got her here. That's what matters." As they wheeled the girl away, the father hesitated. "What's your name, Rachel?" she said softly. He nodded once, as if memorizing it. Then he ran to follow the stretcher. The hallway fell quiet again. The adrenaline drained from her limbs, replaced by a shudder she couldn't control. She leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to her forehead, as a wave of dizziness washed over her. A security guard approached. "Ma'am, you can't access supply carts. There are protocols." Rachel didn't argue. She just stared at the empty hallway where the girl had been. The guard's voice softened after a beat. "But the doctor said you may have saved her life." Rachel looked down at her trembling hands. She didn't feel heroic. She felt terrified. Because that hallway, that moment, that was exactly what she'd feared for her mother every single day. That one slip, one breath, one delay would be the difference between crisis and catastrophe. And it wasn't lost on her that she had reacted with more clarity for a stranger's child than she often could for herself. A nurse hurried out of the procedure area then. Rachel Moore. Her stomach clenched. Yes, your mother is stabilized. The doctor would like to speak with you. Her knees nearly buckled. She followed the nurse into a quiet consultation room where the cardiologist, a tall man with calm eyes, explained what had happened. The arrhythmia, the medications, the need for monitoring the cost. Always the cost. We caught it in time, he said gently. She's resting now. Relief crashed over her so violently she had to grip the edge of the table. The doctor hesitated. One more thing, he said. The gentleman from the hallway, the father of the little girl, you helped them. Rachel swallowed. Yes. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. My staff said you set up oxygen faster than some first-year residents. Not many people stay composed in those situations. She shook her head quickly. I wasn't composed. I was terrified. That's the difference, he said. People who are terrified but still act, that's who saves lives. He left her with that. Hours later, Rachel sat beside her mother's hospital bed. Machines beeped slowly, rhythmically. Her mother's eyes fluttered open. You look shaken, her mother murmured. Rachel tried to smile. Long morning. Her mother reached for her hand. Come here. Rachel sank into the chair, resting her forehead against her mother's knuckles. I got fired, she whispered finally. Last night. Her mother stroked her hair, the same motion she'd used when Rachel was 5 and had scraped her knees on the driveway. I'm sorry, baby. And today, something happened. A little girl in the hallway, she couldn't breathe. No one was there. I didn't know what else to do. Her mother's hand paused. But you helped her. Rachel nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't think. I just remembered what it was like watching you struggle, and I couldn't let her father stand there alone. Her mother squeezed her hand with surprising strength. There it is, she whispered. That's who you are. Rachel dropped her head, sobbing quietly. She hadn't heard kind words in so long. She didn't realize how starved she was for them. As the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, turning the hospital room gold, Rachel drifted into a fragile calm. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? A man's voice, steady, deliberate, filled her ear. Ms. Moore. My name is Thomas Avery. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Dayton General Health Network. Rachel blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, I was informed about what happened in our hallway this morning. I'd like to speak with you. In person. Her pulse quickened. I'm not in trouble, am I? Quite the opposite, he said. You demonstrated something we value deeply, something you can't train into people. I think you may be exactly the kind of person we need. Rachel's breath caught. Someone needed her, not out of pity, not out of convenience, because of who she was when it mattered. When can you come by my office? He asked. There it was, the shift, the moment she'd never seen coming. The moment when the world finally looked at her and didn't see a tired cashier or a struggling daughter or someone easy to overlook. Someone saw the truth. She exhaled shakily. I can come today. Good, he said warmly. I look forward to meeting you, Ms. Moore. When she hung up, her mother was watching her with soft, knowing eyes. What was that, she asked. Rachel wiped her cheeks, breath unsteady. I think she whispered something just changed. and for the first time in a very long time, she felt it. The pressure wasn't just pushing her down anymore. It was pushing her forward. When Rachel arrived at Dayton General's administration wing later that afternoon, she still felt the tremor in her hands from the morning. Her mother was resting comfortably, the monitors steady. The little girl in respiratory distress had been transferred to pediatrics, stable and improving. And Rachel, she was walking through automatic glass doors into a place she'd never imagined entering. The receptionist looked up as she approached, her brows knitting. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Avery," Rachel said quietly. The woman blinked. "You're Rachel Moore?" "Yes." A strange softness washed over the receptionist's face, like recognition or gratitude, or something deeper than either. She stood so quickly her chair bumped against the wall. Of course, he's been waiting. People didn't usually wait for Rachel. Not like this. Not with anticipation. The receptionist led her down the carpeted hallway. Nurses passing by gave her second looks, curious, lingering almost reverent. One man in scrubs paused and nodded at her, as though she were the guest of honor at an event she hadn't been invited to. Somewhere in the hospital, word had already spread. When they reached a set of double wooden doors, the receptionist gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Go on in." Inside the office was large but warm shelves lined with medical texts, family photos, hand-sketched architectural drawings of hospital expansions. A tall man in a charcoal suit turned from the window overlooking the city skyline. "Ms. Moore," he said, stepping forward with both hands extended. "Thank you for coming." His grip was firm, his expression sincere. "I understand you had a difficult morning." She almost laughed. Difficult didn't begin to cover it. "I'm fine," she said instead. "My mother, she's stable now." "Good," he nodded. "Sit, please." She did, clasping her fingers together so he wouldn't see them tremble. He sat across from her, studying her face, not judgmental, not prying, more like someone trying to understand a puzzle piece he hadn't known was missing. "Rachel," he began. "I watched the security footage." Her stomach dropped. "I know you weren't supposed to access that supply cart, and technically you didn't follow hospital protocol." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to." He raised a hand gently. "I'm not reprimanding you." She blinked. He continued leaning forward just slightly. "What I saw in that footage was someone who recognized crisis faster than trained staff, someone who acted decisively, intelligently, compassionately, and who very likely prevented a respiratory arrest." Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Avery tapped the desk lightly. "People who panic at the wrong moment cause harm. People who freeze cause harm. But you," he tapped once more, "you acted with clarity. And that clarity only comes from one of two things: professional experience or lived trauma." Her breath hitched. He wasn't guessing. He was seeing. "Tell me," he said softly, "where did you learn that level of response?" Something inside her cracked open. Not painfully, more like a door she'd kept shut for too long. "My mother," she whispered. She's had heart issues for years. We've had emergencies at home. Sometimes waiting for help wasn't enough. I learned what to look for, what to do. I paid attention during her hospital stays because one day I might have to save her." The words spilled out like water breaking through a dam. "I never wanted to be a nurse. Or a doctor. I just needed to know enough to keep her alive." Mr. Avery's expression didn't change, but something softened behind his eyes, a kind of recognition she had never received from any boss, supervisor, or co-worker in her life. That he said is more than training. That is instinct. That is responsibility. That is heart. She bowed her head, blinking back tears. He waited until she steadied. "I looked at your background," he said gently. "You've moved between retail and pharmacy roles. Always long hours. Always reliable. Yet no advancement." She stayed silent. "You cared for your mother instead of pursuing higher education. Yes. You sacrificed personal ambition for family. Yes. You've been overlooked," he said quietly, "in every room where you should have been recognized." Her throat tightened. Nobody had ever said it out loud before. Nobody had acknowledged how hard she fought just to stay afloat. He sat back in his chair. "Rachel, people like you are rare. You understand struggle. You understand fear. You understand what it means to act when others hesitate." He let the silence settle before continuing. "And that is exactly the kind of person I want in this hospital." Her head snapped up. "What I'd like to offer you a position," he said plainly. "A real one. Not clerical. Not stockroom. Not entry level." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "I want you to join our new Patient Support and Advocacy Unit, a program for families in crisis, people overwhelmed, lost, terrified, needing someone with both compassion and lived experience to guide them." She shook her head instinctively. "But I'm not qualified. I don't have a degree. I've never worked in healthcare. I'm just—" "Stop," he said gently but firmly. She did. "You are precisely qualified because of who you are. Skill can be taught. Empathy cannot." Her chest tightened again, but this time with something other than fear. "Hope," he continued. "The staff who treated you poorly at your last job. They didn't see you, but this hospital. We see what you did today. We see your potential, and we see the kind of leader you could become. Leader." Nobody had ever connected that word to her before. "You'll have to train," he said. "Shadow staff. Attend workshops. There will be days when the work breaks your heart, and days when it fixes you. But if you join us, you'll be changing lives." She stared at him, stunned. He smiled faintly. "And frankly, Rachel, we need people like you far more than you need us." Her eyes filled, blurring the room. She pressed a hand over her mouth. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it." She nodded, tears slipping past her fingers. As she rose to leave, he added softly, "One more thing." She turned. "The father of the little girl. It turns out he's one of our board members." Her breath caught. "He asked for your name," Mr. Avery continued. "He wanted to meet you. Personally. Why? Because his daughter is breathing tonight, because you stepped forward, and because he believes you have something his hospital, his community desperately needs." Rachel stood frozen. A board member. A man with influence, power, and reach far beyond her world, someone who had seen her at her most instinctive, most vulnerable, and now held her in high regard. "Everything changes when the right person witnesses the truth," Avery said quietly. She walked out of that office in a daze, heart-pounding, mind-spinning. In the hallway, two nurses paused mid-step, whispering as she passed. One offered a shy, grateful smile. Another gave a small nod of respect. Respect. She had never expected to find it here. She had never expected to find it anywhere outside her mother's gentle voice. She reached the end of the corridor and pressed a hand to the cool wall, letting the moment settle around her like warm air after a storm. People weren't looking through her anymore. They were looking at her. The woman nobody saw at a discount pharmacy. The woman criticized, dismissed, underestimated. Now nurses lifted their chins when she walked by. Doctors paused. A board member waited to meet her, and an opportunity, one that could rebuild everything she lost, was sitting in her hands. She closed her eyes. For years, she had lived in survival mode. But today, in a single breathless morning, the world had shifted, tilted, reoriented itself around a truth she had never dared to believe. She mattered. She exhaled slowly and opened her eyes. She wasn't done unraveling what the offer meant, not for her, not for her mother, not for the life she had given up years ago, but she felt the weight of a crossroads settling inside her. A choice was coming. A choice that could either lift her into a future she'd never imagined, or terrify her enough to run back to the small, dim life she knew how to survive. Before the week ended, she would have to decide. But for the first time in a long time, the decision was hers. 2 days after her meeting with Mr. Avery, Rachel walked back into Dayton General, not as a visitor, not as someone begging for help, but as someone expected. The receptionist, who had barely looked at her before, now greeted her with a warm smile. Nurses nodded as she passed. Even a doctor she'd never seen before paused to say, "You're the one from the hallway, right? Good work." She wasn't used to it. Not the attention, not the gratitude, not the sense that her presence meant something. For years, she'd lived in the corners of rooms unnoticed unless something went wrong. Now people straightened when she approached. They asked her how her mother was doing. They treated her like she belonged. But the moment that undid her happened outside her mother's room. The father of the little girl stood there, his daughter beside him, holding a balloon covered in cartoon owls. When the girl spotted Rachel, she let go of her father's hand and ran forward with the kind of trust only children give. "You helped me breathe," she said softly. Her father's eyes glistened. "I don't know how to thank you. I wouldn't have known what to do." Rachel knelt, smoothing the girl's coat. "You brought her here?" she murmured. "You did exactly what she needed." The man shook her hand firmly, respectfully. No pity, no condescension, the kind of handshake offered to someone who'd stood in a fire and walked out holding someone else by the hand. And then, as if timed by Providence itself, Mr. Avery stepped into the hall. "Rachel," he said, "I'd like you to meet the newest advocate in our patient support unit." She blinked. "Me?" He smiled. "If you're ready." Her throat tightened, but this time with something bright and powerful. She nodded. It felt like accepting the life she'd never let herself imagine. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Volunteers stopped her in the cafeteria to congratulate her. A few staff members who'd whispered earlier now avoided her eyes entirely, their shame written in their silence. One pharmacy tech from her old job even showed up at the hospital with flowers, stammering an apology for not defending her when she was treated unfairly. "It's okay," Rachel said gently. "We're all doing our best to get through the day." But she meant it. She carried no bitterness. The path in front of her felt too precious to weigh down with old hurts. She completed her onboarding faster than anyone expected. During her first shadowing shift, a social worker whispered, "You've done this before, haven't you?" And Rachel simply smiled. Not because she had formal training, but because she had lived every version of fear these families now faced. Weeks passed. Her mother improved under new medications that the hospital helped her access. For the first time in years, Rachel didn't dread rent notices or prescription refills. She had steady income health insurance and a team that trusted her instincts. By spring, she was leading small workshops for new patient advocates, teaching them how to listen, to truly listen to a parent's panic or a spouse's confusion. She taught them the power of sitting down, instead of standing over someone, of lowering your voice instead of raising it, of letting silence do the healing when words were too heavy. And people listened. Because when Rachel spoke, it came from a place deeper than textbooks or training modules. It came from the long nights she'd lived herself. Her mother would sit in the auditorium during those workshops wrapped in a soft shawl the volunteers had gifted her. Every time Rachel finished speaking, her mother's eyes glowed with a pride that no job title could ever match. Summer brought something unexpected. The board invited Rachel to speak during the hospital's annual community forum, an event usually reserved for administrators and physicians. She walked onto that stage with her palms sweating and her heart racing. But when she looked out at the families, the nurses, the shift workers still wearing their scrubs, something inside her settled. She told them the truth, that she had once been fired for caring too much, that she had spent years believing she was invisible, that the night she helped a stranger's child breathe was the night she realized she had been preparing for something she didn't yet understand. When she finished, the auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Not loud, not wild, but quiet and sustained, like a room full of people saying, "We see you now." A year after the incident, Rachel stood outside the new Family Resource Wing, a space designed for crisis counseling advocacy, financial navigation, and quiet prayer. A plaque mounted near the entrance read, "Dedicated to those who act with courage before they realize they have it." Her name was engraved beneath it. She touched the plaque lightly, then turned as her mother approached with slow, careful steps. "Look at you," her mother whispered, tears shining. "You built a life out of one moment of bravery." Rachel slipped an arm around her, smiling softly. "No," she said. "I built it from every moment that came before. The world just didn't notice until now." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Well, they notice now." Rachel looked through the glass doors at the families waiting inside, worried fathers, exhausted mothers, frightened children, and felt a deep, steady warmth settle in her chest. She wasn't lost anymore. She wasn't overlooked. She wasn't surviving one crisis to the next. She had become the person she needed when she was younger. The person she had searched for in every sterile hallway, in every long night, in every frantic call for help. And as she walked into the Family Resource Wing to start her shift, she carried with her the quiet truth she had earned through pain, through perseverance, through love. Sometimes the world finds its heroes in the ones who never expected to be noticed. And sometimes the smallest act of courage becomes the doorway to a life finally worth living.